conversation. So welcome to everybody to our Ask Me Anything for Dallas Startup Week. We're excited to be here to answer questions about how startups can work with corporations. My name is Dwayne Dankeschreider. I'm the Senior Vice President of Research and Innovation at the Dallas Regional Chamber. I'm also a board member of the DEC Network. We're going to try to make this as informal. This is an Ask Me Anything, so we're going to open it up to lots of questions. Make it as informal as we can get it and get a good Q&A going between our panelists and attendees. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this session, in particular this Ask Me Anything session during Startup Week, was that in my role at the Chamber, and I know Bill sees this often, that we get the questions about how to work with startups, corporations asking how to work with startups, startups working with how to work with corporations. And sometimes for us, that's just making that connection, getting aware of what's out there, what things our companies in Dallas-Fort Worth are doing, and then how to get plugged in. So that's really what this conversation is about. One of the things that I see lots of companies doing these days are issuing challenges out to the startup community and out to innovators in the community to solve real world challenges and real world problems within the community. That's kind of what we're going to focus on today, how companies are challenging startups. There's several things that are happening in the region right now in Dallas-Fort Worth that I wanted to throw out to people and have questions. So I'm excited to have Chris Fitzgerald, the CTO of NTT Data. He's going to talk about their Open Innovation Contest. That's going to be a fantastic fit for some of our startups to engage with some of their largest clients. Mickey Fokin, Director of Care Delivery Information Lab at Children's Health. Thank you, Mickey, for being here. I know we've talked many times about how you guys are being innovative and connecting into the startup community. And of course, Bill Spruill, President and CEO of Tech Titans. He's going to share about an initiative they have. That's their 5G challenge. That's working with a number of Dallas-Fort Worth companies on challenges within the startup community around 5G. So let's do this. Let's first spend a few minutes having each of you talk about and maybe give a quick overview of things that you have going on and give an overview of both the challenges that you're involved in and then we'll open it up to questions and I'll moderate from there. So I'll start with Chris, if you can maybe talk a little bit about what's going on y'all's end.
Sure. So thank you, Dwayne. So for those on the call, a bit of background, NTT Data, we're part of a large group called NTT. It's the AT&T of Japan. And as such, we have a very strong Japanese heritage around innovation, R&D, and transformation. And Bill, as you know, very strong in the 5G space. We're very excited about your 5G challenge. About 120,000 people are involved in the company, about $3.6 billion in R&D spend annually, and very excited about, in effect, how we drive innovation with our clients. And as Dwayne mentioned, every year we tend to have an open innovation contest, and it's really where we take client challenges, publish them to the startup community, look for those candidate companies, have kind of a Shark Tank event where people kind of compete and share and show, and with that then bring those innovations with our clients. And the key thing is it's a client, in effect, anchored event. It's not just interesting things for us, it's what our clients are asking people to help solve for them. And as Dwayne mentioned, it's kicked off, the website is live, and hope to get some offline time with various candidate companies to talk about that today. So thank you, Dwayne.
Well, Chris, one of the things that Chris and I met last year, NTT Data has their U.S. headquarters here in Plano, right? And I was talking with Chris and I said, I see you've got this Open Innovation Challenge. Where do we get Dallas plugged into that conversation? So that is a result of this conversation of seeing how we can make sure that our companies are directly involved.
Yeah, I can tell you what, last year they were physical events, Dwayne, and you could point. This year it's all virtual, which means we no longer limitation because folks might think, why would I fly from Dallas to California for 17 minutes? And with things being virtual, it's now very engaging. We're very excited to have ability to spend more time with the Dallas community in that space. Thank you.
Great. Mickey, you want to give an overview of Children's Health and the work that you guys are doing and maybe a little bit of the involvement in the Kids X Accelerator?
Yeah, you bet. So my name is Mickey Fokin. I'm the director over the Care Delivery Innovation Lab here at Children's Health. We're about a 600 to 700 bed health system that has hospitals in Dallas and the Plano region and a bunch of other services. My role is to run our innovation lab, and it's twofold. One is inside out innovation, where we advocate for people submitting ideas internally. And then when they submit ideas or a pain point, we'll go out and try to find solutions that address that pain point. And then also outside in, we always like to stay in contact with new healthcare related innovations. And sometimes, those are a good fit for something that we're already working on. We've recently joined a new accelerator that's based out of Los Angeles, and it's called KidsX. This is a collaboration between 30 different pediatric health systems across the US, and I believe there's one from another country that's participating, so I guess you could say it's international. And so we recently had our kickoff event where we identified the pain points. We all aggregated our pain points, voted on them, and slimmed them down to 10 topics that are the pain points that the accelerator will be focusing on. KidsX will be opening applications and soliciting applications from startups within the next, I believe, next few weeks. And then our goal is to choose the final startups, and we will have a startup selection day. Like Chris was mentioning, it'll have to be virtual, unfortunately, because of everything going on. So we're going to be virtual too, and the startup selection day is in mid-November. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what these topics that we're focusing on, this list of 10, feel free to reach out to me.
And Mickey, you'll post your contact information, or we can make sure we can connect you in as we go along.
All right, that's a great idea. And I guess I could probably try to paste those top 10 things into the chat.
Yep.
All right, I'll try.
Hey, Bill, can you give us an update on the 5G challenge and what's going on with Tech Titans and with that?
Sure, happy to. So Tech Titans is a membership association for technology and technology-enabled companies based here in North Texas. We've been around for a little over 25 years, largest membership association of its kind in the state. Interestingly, the CIOs for both of Chris's and Mickey's organization are on my board. Pamela Aurora from Children's Health and Barry Shirkey from NTT Data are both on my board of directors. And over the years, we've had an innovation initiative in which we've tried to connect the bulk of our membership are large enterprises and try to connect them with university researchers and entrepreneurs. We often did a one-to-many strategy where we would take the interests of a particular company and pitch it out there and vet responses, solutions, and try to make connections for entrepreneurs. Our Innovation Collider group came up with kind of a many-to-many strategy around 5G. And as you know, 5G is rolling out nationwide. It's the next generation mobile broadband technology. And COVID has really created some problems in life, health, work, and education that 5G is uniquely positioned to solve. And so with the help of companies like AT&T, Cisco, Nokia, Ericsson, Axis, and many others, we put out a national grand challenge to entrepreneurs and startups. And it is to propose solutions using 5G technology in those four areas: work, life, health, and education. And we have an application that is on our website, techtitans.org. Tomorrow is actually the application deadline. So if you're out there in the audience and you want to get an application in, you better do it quick. We have some celebrity judges who are going to help us, including Mark Cuban and Charlotte Jones Anderson. They're going to help select the winners of the competition, and the grand award is $20,000 plus access to corporate mentors and corporate research and technology. And I suspect that there'll be more than just one awardee. We might have multiple awardees, and we're really using this as a way to hook up really bright entrepreneurs with those major companies and get solutions out to the marketplace.
So I think the key of what Bill said is the big companies that are in our region that are trying to connect into startups, and the startups that are trying to connect into them. It's really about what that big company has to offer. Sometimes it's for NTT Data, it's the clients that you're working with, right?
And by the way, the winner gets $100,000.
Yeah, well, of course. So, Chris, can you talk about, because when we talked about the challenge, can you talk about maybe the focus of the contest, the verticals, the things that at least our startups might be interested in plugging in with. And then again, if anybody has questions, post them in the chat, and I will share those back to the crowd, to the group.
Perfect. So there's three main theme areas. One is kind of next generation healthcare, and I love Mickey's comments. It's a lot of things around that at home. It's providing healthcare to the underserved. One of the finalists last year actually had a physical robot that would interact with the home person, make sure they were cognizant and aware. And they literally dispensed their pill for them right in front of them to make sure they took their prescription. So healthcare is a big part of it. The second one is around smart everything. So how do we have much more of a smart city, smart workplace? Think about returning safe to location. How do you have things like thermal cameras, AI that looks for masks on your face to provide a safe environment? That kind of extension on that IoT. And the third was kind of exponential technologies, things that are kind of outside of the realm. So it might be whether it's quantum or cybersecurity, things that are a little bit different. And I would say underlying all of that kind of AI is probably the powering of all of it. So whether it's really driving around AI ethics and transparency are those kind of big three things. And I think key thing going is, you look at the winners we've had. One of our finalists 2 years ago was Motion Lock, which is one of Mark Cuban's companies built, here in Dallas. And they were providing the cameras for the city of Las Vegas for smart cities with us. So it's that kind of correlation of things from the Dallas and so forth. So those are the main three themes to it. And it really is wide open. So the themes and questions are out there designed to be open. They're not specific. The idea is just around healthcare with these 2 or 3 areas. So we're very open to broader answers than the question. That's why we're using the Open Innovation Forum. It's not to say, can you solve X, but here's a challenge for my client. A group of vendors going to build around supply chain optimization through AI. For those of you in Texas who made it, a group of men was Sarah Lee, Mrs. Barrett Bread, but they're one of our key participants this year.
So can you mention any other companies? I know some of it's quiet and you can't mention the companies, but I think that's, again, these startups want to know they're trying to get into these companies. What's
Well, you've got things like T-Mobile is one of them who's active in it this year. They've got some 5G challenges we're going to be posting this week in that area there. I went to Grupo Bimbo. Some of our clients, they're happy to be mentioned when they're there in the events, some of our large banking clients, but aren't willing to go public on pieces like this. Things like Arca Continental, Southwest Beverage, Coca-Cola are one of those key pieces. New York Life, Latin America, things like that. So those are some of the key members too. But when we get the website posted, it updates every day, so the challenges are out there, but they'll change every day. You'll hear more about the various companies who will participate as we get closer to the October timeframe.
That's great. So, Mickey, you and I have talked about both the internal stuff that you guys do, right? The internal innovation work, and then that question of how you plug in and how you connect into the community to have companies interact and learn of new ideas. How are you finding these ideas, or how are you plugging into the community?
Sure. So one example, one area that we continue to push for, but we might just be ahead of the game, is trying to find ways where when somebody has a telemedicine consult, so let's say, the kids at school or these days at home, and they connect to one of our doctors over video, the doctor sends a prescription. Well, right now, a lot of parents have to go to the pharmacy, pick it up, and that presents a lot of challenges, especially for our Medicaid population. And so we are trying to find ways, how can we sustainably deliver medications to the home and to the school? And, there's a lot of courier programs out there. So in this one, we'd actually reached out to the chamber, who then connected us with the Capital Factory, a local accelerator. And then they helped connect us with one of their, I believe, one of their members that were in the accelerator. So along that vein, I would just encourage you to stay connected with the chamber. I would encourage you to apply to be part of different accelerator groups, because both will expand your network. And organizations such as our own, when we can't find something on Google, or a lot of times we'll search locally to see if there's a company that meets that need. So along that note, if any of you all know of any autonomous car companies or things like that are trying to do a pilot in DFW, we are excited to be a test bed partner for that type of opportunity. The other thing I would say is connect with healthcare specific professional associations. So for example, if you're in the telemedicine space or digital health space, you might join American Telemedicine Association. That gives you wide access to hospitals across the US and the world. So just think about the healthcare association that might be closest to your focus area and join those groups. Lastly, I would share we're part of a couple different ventures groups. And so I would encourage you to explore healthcare specific ventures groups, but especially those, there's kind of been a trend over the last 10 or so years where groups of hospitals and groups of healthcare organizations will join together and form a ventures group that they are each contributing to. So not only do you have potential to get access to investment sources, but then you also immediately get access to a group of large hospitals and health systems that would have the opportunity to review your technology. So a lot of times in my role, I'll get introduced to a new company that we're considering to invest in or are investing in. And our role, of course, isn't, to say we have to use it, but rather just to educate our organization on, hey, here's a new technology. Is there a pain point that you're experiencing? So there's a couple different ways: chamber, accelerator groups, venture groups, and professional associations. I encourage you to explore them all.
That's great. So we had a question in the chat. Brandy asked, what's the biggest challenge your company has faced during COVID, and how did you pivot in this new environment? Bill, I'll maybe you and we can jump in with our experiences with member companies from the chamber and Tech Titans perspective, but Mickey and Chris, I'd love to maybe hear a little bit about what's happened for you guys.
I'll start with, so two things. One is, from our company, we had to move basically 48,000 people out of facilities in basically 7 days around the world. And that's the biggest challenge. It wasn't actually doing that. It was, for a lot of our customers, they got very comfortable that their people were on site. And for them, it's like, well, we need these folks on site. And what they realized all of a sudden was, actually, this actually works pretty well. So it was almost the reorientation that remote can work. But I'd say the challenge of that is it works fine for, I'll say, day-to-day productivity, but the social interaction is not the same. And I think the single biggest challenge is, I used the phrase last week, we're business excited and driving, and we're environmentally bored. And so we're seeing much more of a focus now on, when we go back to office, not around getting back to your cubes or offices, but to collaboration, to teams. One of our key clients, Dwayne, they reopened a few months ago, but they closed the cafeterias, they closed the break rooms, any of those things that were social connecting. And after 1 week, everyone went home. And their point is, I have more access and more friends at home online than I do in the office. So I think that challenge is the personal side. And the last thing I'd say is, it's interesting. So two of our key clients went pilot. One is the CDC. Our people had to help them go offline, go off-site in light of the pandemic. So how are you helping people who are running these labs do that? And then also hospitals. You mentioned, Mickey, like the children's. Our on-site people are still on-site at hospitals. They're there on the floor, with the practitioners, making sure that their equipment is working. If I could share a story, Dwayne, one of our agents, just got a call from one of the nurses saying, I've got a patient who's dying. Can you bring me a laptop with a camera to their room? We can have a video call with her family before she passes, because they can't come in the hospital.
Right.
And they ran the whole of the hospital, get to that room in time to have that PC in front of them. To me, that kind of story just is almost, it's heartbreaking, because you think of the two things. They did something above and beyond to help that person, and 1 hour later, the person passed. So, in that COVID time, it's really pivoting towards really driving intimacy, driving the social part, and really understanding that we are all here to solve this together.
Have you seen any of your companies, have y'all looked for startups to solve some of those challenges? Have you seen any clients to say, hey, here's a unique solution, and try to bring it into the fold during all of this?
We had some of that. We had some great startups like InTouch Partners around from the telemedicine that Mickey mentioned. You probably know them. So we've seen a lot of that in the telemedicine health. It's been interesting, and a lot of it's been also around how we help them scale, because a lot of these, as Mickey knows, telemedicine's not new. It's been there for years. Adoption was like, and then all of a sudden here came the pandemic, and it went from 0 to 50 overnight. Well, these guys couldn't begin to handle the support calls and so forth. So part of the challenge became, how do we help them scale with things like virtual agents, chatbots, to help them interact with their people as the explosion came out. So I think it's been more of that. I think the startup is more now, Dwayne, as we're kind of settling into what is that next normal? How do we accelerate that change? Because if anything, things are going faster than they did before. I'd say innovation isn't dead. It's gone on to high speed during this time frame.
Right.
And I'll just echo Chris's comments, and you actually explained a lot of things that we're doing. The telemedicine is not anything new, and I have so much respect and kudos to our telemedicine group, because they had to hit the ground running. Our telemedicine volumes expanded significantly. And luckily we had a lot of infrastructure in place. Now, because of some of the demand, we actually started exploring some technologies that we hadn't used for telemedicine before that are still, of course, HIPAA compliant, like Zoom and things like that. But it's been an interesting journey. And Chris, it's interesting you talked about the social element too. We, about 2 weeks ago, got a request into our innovation lab saying, hey, this work from home thing is working pretty good. We got, some of the kinks out of our WebEx and Zoom and, still work through it. And it's working great, but we're still missing, that part when you're in the break room and you just chat with someone, or that part where you're in the hallway and you happen to run into somebody like, I've been meaning to ask you something. And so we're exploring that from twofold. One is, what are some of the innovative technologies out there, that do things beyond like MS Teams and Slack? And there's a lot of companies, I suspect, maybe started recently or just exploded because of this. Even one that was interesting, it showed a virtual layout, bird's eye view of the office environment with little smiley faces showing which room.
So there's a local company, Walkabout.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that was the
haven't
one.
seen them.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out, Walkabout. But then the other part we were talking about is even if you have this really neat technology around the social part, you have to have a culture behind it, and the leaders need to support and drive it. Just because you have this neat Second Life avatar type environment doesn't mean that people would use it. So while we are looking at some of the really cool bleeding edge things, we're also looking at what are simple ways we can use like MS Teams to have like a virtual water cooler. And our division actually started doing that. We're like, you know what? We don't have a chat room where you can just go in and, for extroverts like me, say whatever you want. I was like, hey, what are y'all gonna do this weekend? This is what I'm gonna do. Helps itch that scratch or scratch that itch. So it's been an interesting journey though.
Yeah.
No, Dwayne, that's exactly what I'm hearing from all the large companies that are members of ours is that, as they kind of deal with their workforces and, what was, kind of a wow factor in working virtually and the excitement of being on a Zoom or WebEx call, and after a while that got a little old. And then there was this kind of hope that somehow, COVID was going to go away. We're all going to go back to work. Well, that didn't happen. And so frankly, a certain amount of, depression kind of set in. And the biggest concern I hear a lot of executives talk about is how to maintain culture in a virtual environment and how to keep your workers motivated. And I'm seeing lots of interesting ways, that companies are doing it. And you had mentioned a couple. For us, just like at the chamber, we're having to build more intentional networking into our events. I mean, if you talk about a pivot, we were in the business of bringing people together literally, and now we can't do that. And so, it was relatively easy to pivot to providing virtual content over a platform like this. But how do you really engage? How do you have an authentic conversation? How do you just have an accidental discussion about something and you begin chatting around it, and next thing you know, you've got some ideas blooming? That's the real challenge.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Especially for new relationships. I think if you know someone already, you can continue the discussion easier. But we had one client, Dwayne, where we went from first introduction to live with them, and there's never been a face-to-face meeting, a live face-to-face meeting, because it was basically started 5 months ago. And that's different. And how do you maintain a relationship in this way? I think it's a challenge. You highlighted, Mickey. I like the water cooler. We have virtual happy hours, but I like the idea of over lunch having a water cooler, just having a team site open that anybody walks into, and just I kind of like that. A little walkabout. Yeah.
That's what we're doing at the DRC, where we have a standing sort of time where people can just jump in. It's like you're sitting at the cafe and you're having a conversation. So we're trying that. But Chris, you said something. Actually, there's one other question about the real estate side. Have you seen companies talking about real estate? What's it looking like? Do you find that your company is looking to de-densify corporate office locations? Do your teams utilize flexible office solutions like co-working?
I'll give you three pieces. So our clients are telling us, and this is, I'd say, variation, but almost no one's planning to go back to location in the same way they were before. Okay. Now, the variation from rotating teams, one of our customers plans on literally team one is week one, team two is week T, more though from a social standpoint than a doing work standpoint. I've got some though that are, like more the healthcare side, especially the providers that are thinking more back to more normal. But most of them are saying like, I'm thinking 70 to 80% will not be permanently housed in a building again. Now with that, does that mean a lot less space? I think some of your larger spaces, it's more of a reconfiguration to more social spaces, collaboration, less the walls of offices or sea of cubes. What's interesting, I think, though, also is how does that, pit itself out into large call centers where you've got thousands of people? And I think you're going to see that. JLL is one of our clients. Their perspective is 40% of their customers are telling them really no change in total space, but very big change in what the space is used for. I think personally that you'll see a larger shift in that space piece than we've seen so far. And so I was kind of stand back and say, how does this work? And I become more engaged. Do I go away from my own space to more office sharings, Regis, things that don't require me to own it? I think you see more of that happening even for the large corporations that before wanted to own their own space.
Have you, maybe keeping it back to the startup part of the conversation, one thing I'm hearing over and over again is customer engagement. Like you said, you sold you were able to, get new clients through all of this, right? And you probably haven't shaken their hand yet. So have you seen companies, startups or others doing it really, really well? And how are they plugging into the corporate conversation?
I would say the ones that have done it really well, the ones that quickly pivoted to, I used to figure the physical engagement was it, and they found a way to have that virtual engagement early and very impactful. I mean, in some ways, it's fun because they aren't challenged with the legacy approach to PowerPoint and things like that. So they pivoted very quickly into a different engagement model. They send you a coupon, and then they send you a bottle of wine for the conversation. They've been probably created in the how I create the connection early. Okay, and then once you get on the video, it's not the traditional, let me show you PowerPoint. It's a little more dynamic and things like that. I think the startups are probably, because they don't have the legacy to burden them, I think I need to be different in my approach. I say the negative side is that it's probably harder for them to connect because we could have gone to an event and seen 30 of them. It's harder to see 30 of them now to pick out. So I think this thing you're having right here is important. That connectivity part to know who to talk to is hard. Both directions. It's easier for us because we're large in the VC world, but it's harder for them to say, well, you question like, who do I go to? Bill's point with anybody. Ours is, hey, there are folks that can drive this, and that's a hard part. That is the first social touch is hard.
So I'll go back to how does a startup engage with corporations? Like what have you seen that works?
Sure. So I'll just kind of reiterate for some of the people that may have missed it in earlier is it's all about joining those associations where their job is to help disseminate and connect them with organizations. So I would encourage you to connect with your chamber. I would strongly, I'm in healthcare, would encourage you to connect and join various healthcare organizations and participate in various events. A lot of times these associations will put on education sessions that you're able to sponsor and be able to educate the members on your solution. And then I would also encourage you to look for associations like in our world, we have Children's Hospital Association. I mean, that's a membership of all the hospitals. So just leverage those mechanisms where the hospitals are already part of and already members of, and they're used to seeing companies approach and advertise their products.
So Bill, on the 5G challenge, right? All these companies that you've brought into the fold of it, what is their expectations out of all of that? How are they, what are they going to do with those connections that they make?
I think they're looking for some novel ideas that they can help scale. I mean, clearly they would all benefit from more usage of their 5G networks, their 5G equipment, but what they're looking for are solutions that can scale. And, we'll introduce them to funders, corporate venture partners, technology resources, corporate mentors, et cetera. So that's I think what they're trying to look for. I would also say, Dwayne, that there's a couple other ways that startups can get introduced to to enterprises. Both your chamber and my organization have all sorts of events in which we build in intentional networking, and we have large enterprises that are there and use that time to introduce yourself and to talk about kind of what you're offering or what you're looking for. I mean, and I realize that takes work, but it always has taken work. It's no different than a virtual than in a face-to-face environment. You just got to get out there and do that. Second is that, we'll occasionally produce what's called a reverse pitch. And so we'll get a group of companies together, and these are enterprises from different, industry verticals, but they all may have certain interests in IoT or AI or machine learning or analytics or cyber, and engage in those that are put on by accelerators and other entrepreneur support groups, because you'll get the identity of the people who are offering up, hey, here's the roadmap that we're looking for, here's the kind of solutions that we want, and we would welcome your proposal to us. So definitely take advantage of those kind of things. I also think that there's still a lot of people in enterprises that are out there in the meetup groups, and the meetup groups are meeting virtually, and there's no reason that you can't connect through those. So, I mean, some of those solutions are always going to be there, whether it's in person or virtually.
So Keela had a great question. How do these startups stand out in those crowds? So Chris, your Open Innovation Contest is worldwide, right? We've got lots of Dallas startups. How are they going to stand out? What's the magic sauce?
That's a great question, and I think it's a couple of things. One is we're looking for a company that has, first of all, an interesting solution. Okay, so be very clear. What is this about? What's it going to do for us? Number two, passion. Okay, we're looking for someone who's got the fire. Who's got this is what it's going to do for us. That passion to it. Third, one of our key evaluation, Dwayne, is around how they address the United Nations SDGs. Okay, how they address things such as clean water, better health, better food. So how are they driving those things? Because that's the key things all of our clients are asking about, is how we drive that piece of it. And I think the last piece is what's your business perspective? What do you think your value proposition is to us and them? So be clear in that standard. So the thing is that clarity in that discussion, the energy and the pitch, get 7 minutes. So the challenge is the more waffly you are, or I'm not sure, or don't spend all your time talking about my competition. No. It's about what it is, passion, meeting the goals, and then how's that going to meet me? Maybe the fifth piece, Dwayne, what's the value to us, my clients? Okay, yes, I want you to grow, but be very clear that what we bring to you, and you may comment on this, Mickey, that impact from my company. How are you addressing care? Are you addressing the cost of care, the quality of care? Are you providing a different experience for my patients, for my members? Really be crisp on that value prop, not about your value prop to your business, but your value prop to my business.
Yeah, I completely agree. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I completely agree. I mean, when we have an idea that we like, or we run into a company that we like, we have to go through a rigorous business case process that goes up to our executive vice presidents. And the very first question on the form is, what problem are you trying to solve? And there's so many scenarios, especially in my world in innovation, where we see something that looks really cool, and then we're like, what are we trying to accomplish though? Make sure, especially in healthcare, that you can clearly articulate in like one sentence or less what problem you're going to solve, clearly articulate who is going to pay for it. Is it insurance? Is it the patient? Is it the hospital? And then if we solve that problem, what's the return? What are we going to get out of it? Now, we understand not everything can be measured, but at least, be able to speak to that. And then, as a quick closer, somewhere towards the end, you can talk about how you, compare to the competition. One more thing I would probably add, and I heard this from our SVP, while it doesn't exist in every startup, the ones that have a track record of previous startups, of previous, be able to navigate those early stages, that's always a lot of icing on the cake. And we understand everybody always has to have their first company. So if it is your first company, try to find an advisor to serve on your board or somebody to be part of the team that you can bring to the table and say, hey, this is XYZ person's fifth deal. Each one previously was multi-million-dollar, stuff like that. Because unfortunately, we take risks, and here and there we'll encounter a startup that, we're going halfway through the pilot and then they're like, we ran out of money. And so we really don't like to run in those situations. So find somebody that's been there, done that, and make sure you're talking about what pain point you're solving.
Yeah, I want to echo that. There's an old saying in investing, investors bet on the jockey, not the horse. So you want to bet on the person that's done it before. And as Mickey said, if you don't have that experience of having had a successful exit, find somebody who has, get them as a mentor, an advisor, investor, board member, whatever it might be. And that part about, articulating what problem you're solving is so important, just getting it right. But there's a nuance to that. And that is, in my experience in investing, oftentimes what you think is the solution pivots to some other application, and that's what ends up going to market. And so you've got to have the latitude mentally to think about, if it doesn't work in this particular way, where can I pivot to that it will work? And that kind of mental agility is really important.
Yep, agreed. So, Mickey, you mentioned that you've worked with Capital Factory. We had a question about, do corporations look at startups going through accelerators and incubators? And I think that there's 2 points to that question. One is, how actively outward are you? Meaning, you have teams of people looking for things and bringing them into the fold versus waiting for some of those startups to engage with you in different ways. And maybe describe that process. I know you guys, Mickey, you did that. You went to Capital Factory.
Yeah. So I would say there's 2 parts of that answer. If an organization such as ourselves has a formal innovation program that partners with IT or product development, it's more likely that they are keeping an eye on the startup environment and staying connected with accelerators. We do a little bit of both, in the sense of we'll actively kind of monitor, especially if we have some pain points that we still haven't found a solution for. We'll monitor and try to, keep an eye on startups. Our leader has said she wants us to either be the first or the best. And so if there's a new technology that's coming out and, it has a lot of potential, a lot of times we want to be the first to test it out, the first to pilot it. And then, we're also open to organizations reaching us and contacting us, so if we're not soliciting. Of course, as you know, if you're reaching out, it's going to be a little bit harder because it's all about timing. Do we have that problem at this point? Is it a priority at this point? Do we have a budget at this point? But still, it's a numbers game. You want to reach out to as many organizations as possible. And it comes back to being part of those professional associations where their job is to connect.
Yeah.
If I could add one piece to your comment, Mickey, is also when you reach out, align what you're trying to talk about, back to your point, Bill, is to me. Say, hey, I've done some research about your company. We see you are very active in X. We think we have to right off the bat, connect the dot for me. Don't make me connect the dot in the first conversation.
So does NTT Data,
go ahead.
Do you guys work with accelerators and startups?
We're open to that. I'd say kind of depends on timing, because there'll be times when we're out active in that challenge like we are right now.
Right.
There are times, as Mickey said, we work into a different cycle. We also have 2 venture capital funds. We have a worldwide fund out of San Francisco, which basically invests in startups regardless of whether we will use them. We have a separate fund for investing in companies that we want to use. So I think we probably have that. That's more of a deterministic play. But then there's the opportunistic play, which is more, as we have challenges, we will look outside to it. And we tend to look, I'd say, the 30th thing to kind of, I'd say, what we know. It's kind of like, hey, if we're in the Dallas community, we're going to reach out to Bill, because he's got companies we already could talk to, accelerators and things, or VCs we know in the Dallas area. Let's start there, kind of in our own network. So back to Mickey's point, kind of make sure you're in those communities, because we're going to start there anyway. If we go to Bill, he says, hey, I've got this guy you might like. It's an easy connection for us. It's one less connection for us.
Right.
Okay. And that's why Barry sits on the board, besides being a nice guy in areas. But, it's kind of being part of that community.
So Brandy asked a question, which I've heard this question many times, and I think, Bill, you might want to, maybe you can address it first. Any advice to startups who are concerned about working with big corporations in light of what's word on Wall Street and Wall Street Journal article about working with corporations who seem to be interested in investing but end up taking ideas? How do we as a corporate community alleviate those concerns?
Right. By the way, that concern goes both ways, just to be very clear about it. Big companies are very concerned what a startup might do once they get underneath, the tent and see what's inside the enterprise. But the real key is to have a very intentional process for gradually disclosing any IP. And the very first conversation you're going to have, you should not disclose anything that is proprietary or that, has IP involved in it. You want to have a general discussion conceptually about, hey, do we agree that this is a problem area? Do we agree that, there's a solution out there that might be really interesting without disclosing the secret sauce? But don't come to the very first meeting with an NDA and a stack of legal papers that either party, wants you to sign. Don't go there. And we made very clear in our 5G Grand Challenge that, applicants should not submit anything that, it would be protected at this point in the discussion. Ultimately, you'll get there after a while, and you will have, some NDAs that you may need to sign. AT&T's got a very interesting approach about this when they have their foundries. What's yours is yours, what's mine is mine, and what is ours, and that seemed to kind of work pretty well for them. But it's not from the get-go. Just take it easy. Don't disclose the secret sauce from the beginning. Make sure that you've got good legal advice, and ultimately protect yourself.
Chris, Mickey, any additional insight?
I would add to that. So I think we have the same approach you mentioned, Bill, around the what's mine is mine, yours, and ours. We start with the idea of to participate in the competition, we do want an NDA, not so much to understand, because I don't want your secret sauce in that sharing, but I want you to know that anything you share has to be open right now. So back to your point here, Bill, don't give a secret sauce. If you go to next step and you're a winner, you want to build something, you've got to have those understandings. Because my clients are more key about that than maybe because the clients now sharing their IP, their data, their people. And they're probably more worried than I'm about, because it's actually their data that's driving it. So be open to it. I think the last piece is look at the track record of the company. There are companies that you can just read about, they do that. I won't name on the phone call, I don't know that's their model. They either all of a sudden you have a similar product or they buy it. And so I think when you approach the companies, get a sense from them up front of what's their philosophy, and make your point, Bill. It's not the NDA document. Like AT&T, what's your philosophy in IP? At least get that up front with them and understand where they sit with it. It's a great comment.
Mickey, any additional?
And our world is a little bit different in the sense of, healthcare. It's not like a huge dev shop where we're creating stuff internally. We tend to collaborate with organizations more often. But we are used to where, the first call, it's more meet and greet, get to know each other. There might be a short, overview, you do your pitch deck. And then we're pretty comfortable with, after that first discussion, if they ask for an NDA, then we provide it. A small little tip for us, if you use our two-way NDA, it makes the process a lot faster. If you really want to use yours, you can. It'll just go into the legal queue, just to let you know.
Well, and maybe that's the other question. I'll combine Keela and Jim Hurdy had a question about time. Well, Keela talked about money, that obviously the runway is short on some of these startups, and they're looking to partner with and work with companies, corporations, but may not have the runway to do that. Is it worth it? How do they do that? How do they navigate that time frame of short runway and the length of a corporation that it takes to ink a deal?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick that, if I was in your shoes, I would just diversify, do some big ones, do some mid, and do some small. Depending on the time of year and the size and cost of the product, that will influence how quickly it moves on our end. I would advise, when you get connected with an organization, do two things. Learn the approval process, both the formal and the informal, and learn who the executive sponsor needs to be to get it through. We get innovation ideas. So when I was talking about inside out, when somebody shares an idea internally, if we get an idea from one of our EVPs or SVPs, obviously it goes a lot faster and it's a lot easier. When I get an idea that's just as powerful from one of our technicians or one of our frontline staff or our nurses, we partner with them to help them socialize it upward, and that process takes time. But we've had many ideas that somebody said, hey, I wish X, Y, and Z could do this, that we help them socialize it upward, it gets buy-in, and then we submit it to the approval process. But make sure you get that executive sponsor, that executive champion that has the ability to sell their peers when it goes through the formal review process.
I would add one piece, but I think if you're currently month to month on financials, some of your larger companies are probably less interested because they're not that they want a mature, done product, but they're not interested. You made the comment, Mickey, we got one going and halfway into it, the company went away. I think for big companies, they want someone that's got that next year or so covered. Not long term, but that they've got the funding, that their interest really is partnering with us for our clients and for driving scale, not to fund for funding. There's a different arm with us to go for funding. So I think ours is more about scale and growth. You mentioned it's more about scale and growth and getting acceleration and less about probably the day-to-day. If that makes sense to me.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so.
And there's also, Wayne, they just have to recognize that, when you're dealing with an enterprise, don't look for the quick hit. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to suddenly propose something the next day you're funding, you're at scale. Even for ideas that are internally generated within the enterprise, it may take, a couple of years for them to finally get the traction and scale. And part of the problem is, and I think it goes to Mickey's point about making sure you have an executive sponsor, the startup needs to realize you're disrupting a revenue stream that already exists within the enterprise. And to some general manager, that doesn't look so good. But to an executive sponsor, that's exactly what you want to do because you don't want to be out innovated from the outside.
Yeah. One of the recommendations that I always, when I talk with our members in the big companies in Dallas, is, when I think I've said this to Mickey a couple of times, is make yourself visible in the startup community, right? Some of that is you're the pathways, you're innovative people who are connected into the startup community. That's the pathway, right? You've got to have a champion at the same time that gets what you're doing, understands the startup mode, and then be able to take that back to the company. And again, it's a long haul game, right? So we got a few minutes left. Let's circle back to the innovation challenges because I want to give Chris some time to talk about maybe the process and the timing of the challenge. Can you give a little bit more detail on the contest?
So thanks again. So the contest basically is opening as we speak. I put a link in the chat on the side there to the contest if anybody wants to go into it. Basically, the challenger posted, and every day there'll be more challenges out there. So I'd say if you're a startup listening, give us a week. Okay, you'll see a link on there that will show you a flag, American flag, Canadian flag, that takes you to our site. Because there's a flag out there for Israel, there's a flag out there for Italy, for Spain, and you're welcome to compete for any, but you can only compete for one. Pick a country to compete in. It'll then take you to the challenges, and the process is pretty straightforward. It gives you registration, it tells you what to apply for, how to sign up for the piece, and then it puts you in the queue. And we have a team that their whole job is both reacting to the things being posted, but they will also be reaching out to the community, as Mickey said, through the various accelerators and forums to find startups. Okay, you'll be contacted regardless, positive, negative, in, out, on everyone that submits. Once you're in, I'd say that filtering phase will be down to finalists. For the finalists, it's going to be 10 to 12 per competition. We will actually coach them before. So we're not going to put them blind in the Shark Tank. We're going to try and give them at least say, here's what the judges are all looking for. We want to make them all equally able to at least have those questions answered in the competition. It'll be November is when our competition is, mid-November. And then we'll actually partner in the November 10th, December timeframe with the client and those companies, like we did with people like Motionlock, et cetera. And in January, that goes to Japan for the finals, where in fact we present their solution, but also what we as NTT Data are looking to do with that startup going forward. And then, by the way, we had, out of last year, you had two global winners, but there were 8 additional winners that we're already developing POCs in business with right now. So the winners aren't the only ones. Many times the contestants are just as active to us because they may not win, but one of our clients says, I love that solution. I'll go work with them right now. So we have a large exposure point, which is that all of our clients get a chance to see this.
And tell me the time. When does the final challenge, the grand finale?
January. End of January. Yeah. So basically, up through about the 1st of November, you register. We'll coach that. You get told you're a finalist. 2 weeks to kind of finalize the pitch. Mid-November, the competition, the Shark Tank. We're still working, Bill, on having our special speakers. I may talk to you about some ideas there. And then basically, then it's business development for the next few months.
All right, and Bill, you want to give a quick close on we got 1 day left.
Act quickly. I did put the link to the challenge in the chat room. It's not that arduous of an application, but you clearly have to have the idea articulated, the problem that you're trying to solve for, and be able to address that. And if you run into problems, get a hold of me, Bill at techtitans.org.
Great.
That's the best advice I can give.
And Mickey, you want to maybe give a last minute plug for KidsX?
Yep. So real quick. So if you're interested in learning more, go ahead and email me. We'll be accepting applications in between now and the end of October, early November. We'll be choosing the final candidates in middle November. And then the Accelerator Mentorship Program will occur in early next year over a 3 to 4 month period, which will include getting exposure to about 30 different hospitals across the U.S.
Great. Well, I very much appreciate you guys' insight, and I hope our startups that we're watching will log on and apply for these great challenges. We're here to help. The corporate community wants to get plugged in and grow our startups in Dallas-Fort Worth. So we're so proud of Dallas Startup Week and look forward to the next session, which I will be moderating around venture capital, corporate venture capital. So thank you for attending.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you, Chris.
Take care.
Hey, good. Hi there, guy.